Good morning, everyone. I'm Seri Worden, the director of the James Marston Fitch Foundation, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today to the Accidental Preservationist, Artists, Artisans, Outliers, and the Future of Historic Preservation. We're so pleased that you'll all be spending a full day with us and our speakers as we explore the role of the accidental preservationist within the modern preservation movement. Our speakers are joining us from across the U.S. and will no doubt broaden our understanding of what it means to save a building, preserve a neighborhood, and maybe even reinvigorate a city. Today's symposium is in part a celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Fitch Foundation, established in 1989 by the great James Marston Fitch. For those of you unfamiliar with Dr. Fitch, he is widely considered a founding father of historic preservation in the United States. He started the first graduate program in architectural preservation at Columbia University in 1964, and he was a prolific author, educator, critic, and design practitioner. Fitch's vision for the foundation was to strengthen the discipline of historic preservation in the United States by providing critical financial support to professionals working in the field. And for 25 years, the foundation has done just that by providing nearly 50 fellowships to mid-career professionals for projects ranging from an evaluation of urban renewal's modern legacy to the right-sizing of Cleveland to a study of the Baltimore Row House and the reinvention of the Broadway Theater in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. We currently offer 3 fellowships: the Fitch Mid-Career Fellowship, the Samuel H. Kress Fellowship, and the Richard Blinder Award, which is presented biannually to an architect. While providing these grants is our primary activity, we've expanded our mission to include a symposium, the first of which was in 2009. For today's program, it is my hope that we will better understand how inspiration and creativity can spring from our city's built environment, whether the dilapidated, the grand, the commonplace, or the treasured. I have no doubt Fitch would be proud. In the words of Jane Jacobs, Jim Fitch helped broaden the preservationist's aim by emphasizing that the fabrics of entire neighborhoods were worthy of being cherished and showing that their humble components were as vital as the landmarks. I'd like to thank Jennifer Rabb and Hunter College for hosting today's event, and I'd also like to thank the Samuel H. Kress Foundation for their support of our symposium. And I want to let you all know we are filming today's event so that we can produce online videos and podcasts. So be assured the intriguing discussion to come will have legs. And please do remember to turn off your cell phones. It's now my pleasure to introduce the chairman of the Fitch Foundation, Fred Bland. Thank you.
Good morning. I join Seri in welcoming you to this august occasion of the second Fitch Foundation Symposium. 5 years ago, we gathered at the Institute for the Study of the Ancient World to explore a subject sometimes not high on the list of top priorities of preservationists, that is, the aesthetics of conservation and reuse. I believe that symposium tackled an undervalued aspect of historic preservation, but one that I know from personal experience was very close to the heart of Jim Fitch. And I think that we broadened the definition of historic preservation a bit by hosting that symposium. So I hope today will be equally as interesting and equally unusual. Over the past few years, and especially since I have become chairman of the Fitch Foundation, I have urged our board to think about the foundation in 2 ways which are a bit different than we had before. They are, I suppose, my twin goals for the time of my chairmanship. First, a bit arrogantly, I admit, and perhaps not yet earned, is to be thought of as the think tank for the preservation movement. It's a big handle. Where it is going, why, and why it stays relevant and how it stays relevant in an era of more general acceptance. We do this through our mid-career grants that Seri just mentioned, and now, more recently, through our symposia. My second goal is for the foundation to become more readily recognized as a national organization with a scope and a reputation to match. We are starting to do this by adding people to our board from around the country and to continue to award grants for topics throughout the United States. You will be the judge of whether we are succeeding in these goals or whether it's just arrogant hot air. But I hope you will help us with these goals and let me know how we're doing. I spent most of the last 2 weeks in France, a few days in Paris and the rest of it in an ancient village in Provence, where I go every fall. I pinned these words immediately after yet another encounter, a seance really, and not my first, with the Pont Julien, a small yet majestic Roman bridge built in the 1st century BC that until 5 years ago carried traffic. First, of course, Roman chariots, troops, even the emperor himself crossed that bridge. But more recently, modern Citroëns and Peugeots and huge lorries laden with grapes heading to the cooperatives. I spent 2 hours sketching. I didn't spend 2 hours sketching this. I did many sketches. This brilliant little masterpiece of engineering and delicate architectural proportion. As I sketched, wonderfully alone actually, I was thinking about this conference and trying to understand why I felt there was a link between that bridge and this conference, and why it might be called accidental preservation. I began to understand that although this Roman structure was well understood in the work as the work of a brilliant earlier civilization, it was, more importantly, simply the most convenient route for crossing the Calavon River in the Luberon Valley. In other words, it was, for about 2,100 years, a part of life in those parts. Through the end of the Roman era, the early Christian era, the Merovingian, the Carolingian eras, the Romanesque and Gothic periods, the Renaissance, the Baroque, the Romantic, and finally into our own modern time. This structure has been a necessity that was continually maintained for its utility, not so much for its status as a monument from the past to be preserved, rather than a self-conscious and heroic act of historic preservation, all in caps and italicized. This bridge is still a vital presence into the 21st century because it is necessary to cross that river, and this was the most convenient place to do it. Why would you not continue to use it and to maintain it? It is simply a part of the fabric of everyday life, a part of ongoing civilization. Was this accidental preservation? In a way, I think it was and is. 50 to 60 years ago in our country, with the preservation movement in its infancy, most acts of preservation were battles, often lost. The man whose name graces this foundation, James Marston Fitch, was at the forefront of many of those battles, typically providing intellectual heft for the soldiers in the field. From that perspective of 50 and 60 years ago, the battle perspective, it could be argued that preservation has kind of won the war. Historic preservation today has become a legitimate and accepted ingredient of enlightened urbanism. Of course, battles still rage, always will, and some deserving buildings will be lost. However, those of us who view the inclusion of old along with the incorporation of new as the right way to create great cities, well, we now operate on a level playing field. And we often win those battles. No more Penn stations, in other words. Also, perhaps no more wanton destruction of blocks of vernacular houses, whether they be the brownstones in Brooklyn, Painted Lady Victorians in San Francisco, or the streamlined moderns in Miami Beach. I maintain that the act of preserving the best of our past is now ingrained in our culture in a way unthinkable to those warriors of the 1950s and 1960s. It is now understood as natural and normal urbanism, not the activity of a few extremists, or as Jim Fitch himself might say, with a twinkle in his eye, the lunatic fringe. So today we explore how everyday people, not trained, intellectually grounded ideologues like many in this room, how they have become true preservationists, whether they know it and whether they like it. It seems to me this is an extraordinarily hopeful moment of transcendent triumph for the preservation movement, finally to be ingrained within the corporal body rather than an applied skin-deep ointment. Of course, our speakers are not just everyday people. Artists, artisans, outliers, and entrepreneurs are the avatars of metamorphosis. They are in the vanguard, always leading societal change. We have invited here today some of the most interesting of these people from around the country to examine just how critical preservation is to their lives and to their livelihood. Even though, unlike most of the others of us in this room today, they have not been trained to be preservationists. They have come upon it accidentally, as it were. It is simply a part of the fabric of their everyday life, just like that Roman bridge in Provençal, France. I now have the pleasure, true pleasure, of introducing Justin Davidson, a keen interpreter of the built environment. Justin has been the architecture and classical music critic of New York Magazine since 2007, writing about a broad range of urban, civic, and design issues. Before that, he spent 12 years as classical music critic at Newsday, where he also wrote about architecture and was a regular commentator on cultural issues. He has won a Pulitzer Prize for criticism in 2002 and an American Society of Newspaper Editor ASNI Criticism Award. A native of Rome, Davidson graduated from Harvard and later earned a doctoral degree in music composition at Columbia University. He has contributed to many publications, including The New Yorker, W, The New York Times Book Review, Condé Nast, Traveler, and Travel and Leisure. He is a regular columnist for the website Wandering Sound. He has taught at the Design Criticism Program at the School of Visual Arts, the Goldring Arts Journalism Program at Syracuse University, and the NEA Arts Journalism Institutes. He is currently at work on a book, Magnetic City, an architectural, cultural, and historical guide to New York. We have asked Justin to take a big view of all of this, to explore and provoke us to think, to stir the pot a bit here early in the morning, and to help us see where American preservation is heading after its half-century maturation. So Justin, thank you.